and we can pass the value here. We can pass the value here. Now the first option will be here. Will be here count. It's a number. That means we are expecting a number. We are expecting a number and we are defining the values. Not a constant value. You can pass any value collected from a collection also. That's we can see later, right? But here the concept is a rest parameter can be only one rest parameter in function. And rest parameter must be the last parameter in formal list. So here what I am doing is, so I am saying a for loop where, so let suppose item of collection list, let of list, we are printing that console.log item. We are printing the item. After that, we are using console.log. So total count. Here just defining as count plus count. We are adding that value there. That means both parameters we are using. We will later have to use all these in our examples when we are dealing with TypeScript. Initially, this is how we have to configure and define the rest parameter. So let's compile and run this. Right. So here we have to define. So tsc demo.ts and node demo.js, and you can see. So here, what the functionality to be printed, we have to configure that let obj is equal to new demo, and let's call the print function obj.print, because the print function is having that print option. Okay, let's compile this and run, and you can see it prints those details. So a rest parameter allows to pass multiple values. But important is rest parameter can be defined with other parameters like function. So param1 and count. If I write like this, now this is invalid. Invalid. You defined here the function, and in the function we have a count and dot parameter 1, then this is valid. That means the rest parameter must be the last parameter in formal list. So this is the basic point. Why rest parameter must be the last parameter? That's a reasonable point also. Why? Because observe here, whatever the other values passed, they will be stored in rest parameter. That means finally all the end values, because if you are keeping the rest parameter as at any place, then what it will do is it will think that this 3 also comes under rest parameter 1. That's the reason, because multiple values, this 3 also it thinks that it comes under rest parameter. That is the reason only the last values are considered as the values of rest parameter. So there cannot be any another parameter and before, or there cannot be any another parameter after the rest parameter. So that is generally how we can define the parameter. Example for this rest parameter. This is a simple example for the rest parameter. A parameter can be any type parameter. So that means whatever you learned in JavaScript data types, It can be any type. You can use an any type parameter. It can be number, string, object, regular expression, anything. You can define anything as a parameter. But there are some limitations which we discussed about those parameters, right? Anything can be as a parameter, right? Defined as a parameter. Okay. That is the basic rule about the parameters, right? How to configure and use the parameters. Of course, see, the concept is multiple values. Who can store multiple values in JavaScript or TypeScript? Who can store multiple values? Can you store multiple values in a string, normal string type? No, it should be array, right? It should be array. You are talking about more than one value. That means it should be an array type, right? It should be an array type. Every REST parameter must be an array type. Why? Because so we are talking about multiple values, and there should be a parameter that should be array type only. Array type only, right? Okay. That means the parameters that we define, so the parameters that we define. So always important is it should be an array type parameter. For example, suppose, so we are not defining an array type parameter. So list of string type, then obviously it cannot handle multiple values. It cannot handle multiple values, right? So when we are saying that a reference have to handle multiple values, obviously it is an only array type that we have. So it should be an array type. It should be an array type, right? So that is important. So generally multiple value means array type only. So these are all the basic rules about REST parameters. REST parameters are new. Earlier versions of JavaScript don't have any REST parameters. We have the REST parameters now, and we can use those REST parameters. And TypeScript can also utilize these REST parameters, right? Yeah. Next, after understanding the REST parameters, one more important is about function return types. We have to and function return types. Technically, the first question here is why a function has to return a value. So function with return type. Usually, so when we are discussing about functions, one important point is, so function can be defined to return a value, So because actually function is to return a value. But I told you that in TypeScript, function have the behavior of method and procedure, right? It can have the behavior of method and procedure. Function can have the method of behavior of method and procedure. That means it can return a value or it cannot return a value. It have both behaviors. So that means now in TypeScript, function can be defined to return a particular value. Generally, why a function have to return a value? Why a function have to return any value? Usually, so generally what happens, function is defined with a functionality. Function is defined with a functionality. And it generally functionality means, so which includes evaluation of any expression and and handling a logic